So another improvised patch tutorial, we continue with the SurgeXT collection. Today we have the String VCO, which is a Karplus Strong voice. And we will look at everything in a second, but I want to start with the mixer setup. So in the last videos, we used the Venom mixer, right, which is a stereo mixer with 4 channels and also the possibility to expand things with a chain here. And I want to continue using it, but I want to expand it a bit. So in the right-click menu, if you right-click it, we can add various expanders. So for example, one of them will be the solo expander that will add solo functionality. So instead of me just taking the levels all the way down like I did in the last videos, we can actually solo things with the expander. And another expander I want to add is the auxiliary send expander that will allow us to add send effects. I will use a send reverb just so we don't have to use a reverb on each of the voices, unless it's of course for creative users. But just we can add quickly reverb. So I'm going to use as my reverb plateau. The send we will send to the reverb, and the return will return from the reverb from plateau. Right now, when you use send effects, it's a good idea to set them to be all the way wet. So to take the dry all the way down, or if you have a mix control dry wet, set it all the way wet. Otherwise, you will get the dry signal twice. Of course, this is not a mistake or anything. You can, of course, experiment with it, but this is a good idea to know that if you use send effects also in other platforms, not just VCV, also if you have a hardware mixer, it's a better idea to set them to fully wet the effects, because otherwise you get the dry signal twice. Right, so I just added a bit of wet here. So now we have this mixer. I will save this setup. This will be the setup for the next videos. I hope that it will work out. It's nothing too complex. It's a small setup also. It's a small mixer. I like it. It gives us enough space in the patch. But this will be our setup for today and hopefully for the next videos. Okay, so let's move on to the String VCO. As I mentioned, this is a Karplus Strong VCO, a Karplus Strong voice, which means basically you send the signal. There are 3 types of signals here. We'll see them in a second, but you send the signal to a delay with high feedback, with short delay times, and it will start resonating and will give you a sort of a string-like sound. Maybe later we can try this also with a delay module and see how this will work. Right, and again, in this case, we have 3 types of signals we can excite the delay with. Right, we have a burst signal that will be just a short burst of audio. We have a constant signal, a constant exciter that will just continue oscillating and will continue exciting the delay. And we have also an external exciter. We can use external voices, external audio, to excite the delay. So let's see how this will work, right? If I send this here to the mixer, I will use the push module just to trigger things, to trigger this. And why we don't have any audio? Because of course I didn't connect the mixer to the output. Okay. Right, so you see I trigger the String VCO and you get a string-like sound. Right, and again, we have high feedback and short delay times. And with the delay time, we can tune things. Right? And we can choose also different exciters. For now, let's stick with the burst exciter. So just a burst of signal. And we have different bursts here. We have noise, which was this. We have pink noise, which will be a bit darker. And we have also different audio, different waveforms like sine or triangle or ramp. Right, and you can think of the exciter like if, for example, we think of strings of guitar, right? How you excite the string, if it's with a pick, if it's with your fingers, if it's with a bow, for example. Right, so you have different exciter types. We have also the sweep, which is quite interesting. Right, and another way you can change the sound is by enabling oversampling, which will raise the sampling rate by 2 in this case. Right, which will also change the sound. Right, so you can also experiment with it, I think. Let's stay maybe with the ramp was nice. It's not too bright. But still we can hear what's going on. And there are of course other other functions here, other things we can change, but let's start with the sequence. I will go with the sec3 and maybe the quantizer, just so we can stay in a certain scale. Right, so I will send the pitch from, or the first row here from the sec3 through the quantizer that will correct the incoming voltage to musical intervals. We had a video all about the quantizer. Right, and then the trigger to excite, right, or to trigger the exciter actually in this case. Maybe have this a bit quicker. Right, and now I can start changing the notes. Right, let's just leave it for this. We will change things, maybe add a bit of, now we have reverb. Right, add a bit of send reverb. Right, so this is basically how it will work. Right now we are exciting the delay line, and we have a few parameters we can control. First of all, we can control the exciter level, which will control also the decay in this case. Right, so this is already nice. And what we have here on the String VCO, actually we have two delay lines. We have two strings basically that we can excite. And we have control over the decay, which is basically the delay feedback of each string. And we have also a balance control. So if, for example, I take the balance all the way to the left, now we have just string 1. And here we have the decay, dedicated decay for string 1. And again, decay in this case is feedback time, or feedback amount, not time, sorry. Right, less feedback, more feedback. And then with the balance all the way to the right, we have the second string. And again, also here we have a dedicated control for it. Right, then we can mix them or blend them together. And we can also detune them from one another. Right now, I don't know if you know this, but SurgeXT is much more than just modules. It's also a VST, a free VST synthesizer that you can use in other platforms. And if I'm not mistaken on this VST, the detune you can also extend. I don't know why it's not available in VCV, maybe there's a good reason for it, but you can also detune, right, both strings and make this a bit fatter. And I don't know why this is not on purpose, but also the String VCO is not stereo, right? There is nothing stereo about it, just like the FM2 and FM3 that we looked at already. Yeah, so I'm not so sure, this is not on purpose, I didn't choose all mono VCOs, but there are other VCOs in this collection that are stereo and are quite nice. We will look at them in later videos. Let me know which module should I look at next from the SurgeXT collection. Right, so we have two strings that we can set individually the feedback or the decay individually. And we have even another control here. We have stiffness, which to the left will add a low pass filter in the feedback line. To the right, it will add a high pass filter. Right? So you get really a full voice, which can sound really nice. Which can sound really nice, and you can just use it, trigger it, sequence its pitch and so on. Maybe a bit more reverb. Right, so these are the burst exciters. Let's change the sequencer a bit. Maybe add a bit of space to it. I don't know. We can use a trigger sequencer, for example. A trigger sequencer. This one is from Sequocell. Right, and I will use another clock source. Maybe we will just go with an LFO in this case. Right, clock the trigger sequencer. And then I can use the trigger sequencer to run and stop the sequencer, just to add a bit more space, so it's not just always running, right? So let's do something like this. We can do, right, something here, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right, maybe something like this. Maybe I will use another push module just as a trigger source to reset things. So I will reset the LFO, I will reset the SEC3, I will reset the trigger sequencer, right? Just so they are all running nicely together. Right now they are not in sync. The LFO is not in sync with the tempo of the SEC3, so this will give us nice glitches. And I wonder, I'm not so sure why I never tested this, but I wonder if the clock is always running. No, it's not always running. Okay. Yeah, even when the sequencer is not running, the clock is also not running. Right, so maybe it's a good idea actually to sync things. So let me see. Let's see what happens here. Right? Maybe something like this. Right, so all I did was I just sent the LFO also to clock the SEC3. So now the SEC3 and the trigger sequencer are running together, just so we have more repetitive results. Right, of course this needs, it doesn't need, but it would be nice to have some delay here also and some modulation. So for example, first of all, maybe with modulation, the second row, right, again, how the modulation works on the SurgeXT, you have 4 inputs that you can map to different parameters. So I'm sending the second row to the first input here, and I click this button, and now I can map it, for example, to the stiffness, which is in this case a low pass filter to the left again. Right? Right, again, just to add a bit more variation, and also maybe to the decay, maybe of just one of the strings, maybe string 1. Right, something like this, just to add some variation. And let's send this also through a delay. Right, maybe sync the delay also with the LFO. Set different delay times. Add more reverb. Right, so this is how the burst exciters will work. Again, it will be a burst, in this case of a ramp wave or inverted saw, and it will excite the delay, again, delay with high feedback, short delay times. And you know, let's do this. You know what I will do? I will also add another expander, the mute expander, just so I can also mute channels instead of taking their levels down all the time. And let's try, I want to show you this maybe with VCV delay, just a quick demonstration of how this will work, right? We have a delay, we have let's send a burst of noise, for example, right? So we need a noise source, which I have here. And to have a burst of noise, we need to how to control its amplitude. So we will do this with a VCA and a very short envelope. Right, so the white noise will go to the VCA, the envelope will control the VCA, and this will go to the input of the delay. And then in this case, in the VCV delay, we have the wet output, which will be 100% wet signal. So we can just use this instead of changing the mix here all the way wet. I don't know why. Right now, when I send the noise to the delay, right, for now we just hear the burst of noise, but again, we need short delay times and high feedback. Right, and we get a string-like sound. The feedback will control the decay time, right, more or less. And the time will control, the delay time will control the pitch. And we have even a filter here, which is sort of like the stiffness, to the left low pass, to the right high pass. Right? And of course, we can choose also different exciters. So instead of white noise, we can go with pink noise. Right, and this is basically the very basics of how this will work. This Karplus Strong voice, again, delay, high feedback, short delay times, some sort of exciter, can be noise, can be other waveforms, can be all sorts of things. Right, and let's try now the next exciters. We'll use another String VCO, the next exciters type, I guess, which will be the constant. Now with the constant, they will always oscillate, they will always excite, will always excite the delay lines. Again, in this case, we have two delays, two strings, if you will. So what I will do, first of all, I will take the exciter level all the way down, just so we are not listening to just noise all the time, right? This will go to the second input. And now let's start, for example, with the pink noise. So constant pink noise, and again, this will always oscillate. In the case of noise, it will just be random. Right, and you can see something already you can notice is that when I take the exciter level all the way down, it will still decay, right? The feedback is still up, the decay is still high. Right, so there will still be a decay time, but again, it will always oscillate. And this is more or less emulating like a bowing a string, right? Like a violin or cello. Oh, maybe if we take this an octave down. Right, even another one. Right, so this can also be quite interesting. Again, we have two strings, we can detune them a bit more, which is great for all sorts of interesting drones if you want. And again, low pass to the left. Right, so again, also here we can create all sorts of different things. Let me just listen to this again. Right, okay, so here is what we can do. We can take this sequence and we can sample it. And I believe we did this a few times in the last videos. We can use the process module from VCV, which has sample and hold. So the signal we will sample will be the pitch after the quantizer, opalach. Right after the quantizer, and by sampling I mean basically taking snapshots of this sequence at different times and outputting these snapshots, in this case to the string, to the second string VCO. So we will use another trigger sequencer, again from Sequocell. Again, I'm going to clock it with the same LFO, but now instead of having 16 steps, so it's not so repetitive, we will have, let's say, 10 steps. Right, because the Sec3 has 8 steps in this case, right? And if we use a 16-step sequence, it will be just twice 8 and it will always be repetitive. I want this to change. I want this to be a bit out of phase. So I'm using 10 steps. Let's activate just step 1. And this will be the trigger that will trigger the sample and hold. Again, with this trigger, it will take a snapshot of this sequence and it will output it to the string VCO. Maybe an octave up, so it's not so scary. Right, and actually, you know what? This is a bit too quick for me. So what we can do, we can use a clock divider. Oh, you know what? I have a better idea. Instead of a clock divider, instead of using the LFO as the clock, I can use the first output here from the Sec3 to trigger the sequence. Right, and because it's always stopping, right, with the run and stop, right, it will be much slower. Maybe too slow even. Right, maybe it's even a bit too slow. So what we can do is we can merge a few of them. I'm just going to use the mix module from VCV because the gates will not happen at the same time. I'm going to use a few of them. They don't happen at the same time, so we are not really mixing them. We are more combining them, if you will. Right, so now we have 3 steps or 3 outputs. Right, this will change the pitch, and what I want is I want also an envelope that will bring this exciter in and out. So again, I'm setting it to the output, take the exciter all the way down, and then map this to the exciter. Right, maybe with longer attack. And again, in this case, what I will do with the trigger sequencer, we can choose in the right-click menu what type of triggers it will output or signal it will output. I would like it to output a gate, right, to gate the envelope, right, and then we can have a nice long attack and a long decay. No need for sustain in this case. I just want it to come in and out like a string of a violin, right, and let's wait for it. And actually what I see here that we need even a longer gate, which we can do with gates from VCV. With gates from VCV, we can change the length of a gate. Right, you can see the envelope here is not even reaching its peak because the gate is not long enough. So I can change this by sending this through gates and then change the length. Maybe to half a second. No, that's not enough. Maybe longer, maybe 3 seconds. Let's wait for it. Silence. And now. Right, it can be even longer, I guess, maybe 5 seconds. Reverb. Right, maybe have even another trigger here, so it's not so slow. Right? And maybe we can add even a bit of sort of vibrato, I guess, sort of like pitch modulation, just a bit. For this, I will just open the exciter here. Right, just so we can listen to this all the time. So I can set again another modulation source. This is a bit too much. I'm holding Control and Shift so I can make fine adjustments. Right, something like this. Hopalach, this is not what I wanted. Right, something like this. And then I would like the pitch, or not the pitch, but the frequency of the LFO to be something like this. Right, that it will change also together with this envelope, so I can send the envelope also to the FM input and open it just a bit. Right, so now the frequency of the LFO will also change. Maybe I can do this a bit more. Oh, this is not what I wanted. Right? Very cool. Maybe even a bit more detune. Very nice. Right, maybe change here. Yeah, the delay time, a bit more feedback here also, a bit more depth for the modulation, so it sounds a bit out of tune even. Right, now again, we can use also external audio to excite the delay line. So we can use maybe drums. You know, we can use drums to excite it. So let's try and create a sort of a drum groove, maybe with another Sec3, no need for any too many fancy modules, right? So the clock will come from the LFO. And again, just to make sure, I will reset everything. And let's have a few drum sounds. I will just use the drum module from Doc B. So Doc B has this little drum module with different samples, with different drums, bass drum, snare, closed hi-hat, open hi-hat, and so on and so forth. So let's have 3 of them, right? We have 3 rows here in the Sec3. One will be a bass drum, one will be a snare, one will be a closed hat, just so we can create a nice rhythm. And I'm going to mix them also, and I will use the CV mix. Again, it's called CV mix, but it will mix audio really nicely. So bass drum, snare drum, hi-hats. Let's just listen to this. I'm going to solo it for a second. Oh, it doesn't work. I think the solo, yeah, you see, okay, so this is the thing with the expanders. You see here the light is off, it means that it doesn't work. So it needs to be, I believe, somewhere maybe here. Yes, you see, now it works. It should be next to the mute, so now all the lights are on. So now I can solo channel 3, which will be the drums. CV1 will trigger the bass drum, CV2 will trigger the snare, CV3 will trigger the hi-hats. Just because it says CV output and not trigger output and not gate output, doesn't mean you cannot use it as triggers and gates. We looked at it also in previous videos. Voltage is voltage is voltage. Right, so let's have a kick here and here. And I have to open the volume. Let's choose a different sample. The sound doesn't matter so much as it is. We will change it maybe also later because we will use it mainly to excite the delay. So for now, let's just have a sequence, right? Yeah, this one. Right? Right, something like this. Now I use the CV mix and not the other mixer just so I can control the levels a bit, just in case. Although here we also have gain, but never mind, I used the CV mix, so I used it. So now we used another String VCO, right? And instead of sending this to the mixer, I'm going to send this to the audio input, right? And then this will go to the mixer. And now instead of burst or constant, we have here audio input. Right, and now we use the drums to excite the delay. Right, which is quite fun. Again, we can have both of them. Detune them a bit. Maybe this can be our bass. Oh, wow. Oh yeah, this can be our bass. What I would like to do is I would like to amplify this a bit more. So maybe I can take the gain here. That's gain CV. Ah, it's just gain CV. Ah, no, it will control here. This is with oversampling on. This is quite nice. This is very nice. Let's process this a bit with some distortion from SurgeXT, or maybe even add a chorus. What do you think about this? Maybe we can even add a chorus before the distortion, right? So this will go to a chorus, and the chorus will be now stereo. Right, mix all the way up. For now, all the way up. More depth. More feedback, this is nice. More drive. Oh wow, and let's mix it in. Does it work with the other sequences? But let's see, or this became a totally different patch with these drums. You know what we can do? I will take this an octave up, just so it's not so scary. And maybe add modulation here, like random modulation. And I'm going to use Walk from Bog Audio for this. Walk is basically, it will output smooth random voltage, as you can see here on the scope. Later on in later videos, again, let me know what can be a nice module to look at in the next video, because there is also the quad LFO, for example, from SurgeXT that can be quite interesting, or there is even this sequencer envelope, this one, the LFO envelope generator, that can also be quite interesting. Right, but now I will just add modulation here to the stiffness, again in this case a low pass filter. And again reverb. And you know what? Just for fun, let's also add some pitch movement here. And this we can do just with another sequencer, for example, another step sequencer, this again from Sequencel. And I will use the first output here of the drums sequencer, and again, just to make sure, I will reset later on everything. Right, and let's say that we want another quantizer, but the quantizer will have maybe just two notes, maybe just C and E flat in this case. Right, and let's see what will happen. Right, 8 steps. And let's reset everything. I don't know, does it work? It's cool. It's very cool. So again, we use drums to excite the String VCO, and that was it. This was the String VCO. Again, Karplus Strong, exciting and delay, creating all sorts of string sounds, bowed strings, exciting it with external signals, external audio. And yes, this was it. Thank you again so much for watching. Cheers.